So, welcome to the latest edition of Good Employment Chatter, the podcast of the Greater Manchester Good Employment Charter. I'm Ian MacArthur and I'm the director of the Charter, and I'm joined today by Sean Wilcock from Sodexo. And Sean, you're the Starting Fresh Programme Manager, and we're going to hear more about that. So really welcome, Sean. Great that you're here.
Good morning.
Morning. Sean, Sodexo. You've been with them, 4 or 5 years, you were telling me before. During COVID you joined them, but who are they? I mean, everybody's seen Sodexo. They've seen it on the side of a van, on an overall somewhere, but who are they?
It's almost an inside joke at this point about Sodexo being the biggest company you've never heard of. We've got nearly 500,000 people that work for us worldwide. We're the 17th biggest employer in the world. But as you said, until I started working with them, absolutely never heard of them. But we're everywhere. We provide services across the globe for soft services, catering services. When I was still with the recruitment team, I hired a fitness instructor for a hotel. If a company will provide services wants something, we'll find someone and get them in there.
So in Manchester today, where would we find as a Sodexo employee?
Our two biggest sites in Manchester are Manchester Royal, or Central Manchester University Hospital,
Yeah.
and Wythenshawe Hospital. Just across those two alone, there's about 2,500 Sodexo staff.
And you're providing catering, cleaning, portering, those sorts of...
Yeah, absolutely everything. And everything non-clinical at those two hospitals. So down to the maintenance, all the technicians, electricians, everything there at Sodexo, all the drivers, even down to the Costa.
Really?
We franchise that out, and that comes through us. And all staff there, and we train the baristas and everything.
So we're never very far away from a Sodexo employee.
Exactly.
I get it. And there's other companies in that kind of space, MITI, I think, G4S,
Yep.
similar kind of setups. So when did you join them, and tell me a little bit about your own personal journey into the company?
Yeah, so I joined Sodexo roughly halfway through the COVID pandemic.
Okay.
They had a rather large contract for the testing sites in the north of England. I'd just come out of a job that had really affected my mental health. I'm very happy to talk about that because I think it's a very important topic.
Okay.
But I just needed something that would continue to pay the bills. And there was a lot of staff requirements for those COVID testing sites. I'd been with them about 6 weeks until I got a conversation with my supervisor on the site. Went into a little bit about my experience with security management and project management in the past, and he highlighted that there was a job vacancy going at a site closer to my house for a supervisor role. So I went in for this supervisor position, but because of how fluid the COVID response was, by the time it got to the interview, the supervisor role was then for a manager role.
Wow.
From there, got that one. I'm very fortunate in terms of the management support that we had on COVID, because that came from Sodexo's Sodexo Live team, the ones that run the stadiums, events and that sort of thing, which obviously were straight out the window with COVID.
Sure.
But the staff there, their adaptability is second to none. So worked with those, learned their ways of working, and by the end of COVID was a mobilisation manager working across the country and doing all the training at different sites. And
that's a really inspiring story, actually, Sean. I mean, when you think about COVID, for many people, it was quite a salutary time. I think everybody kind of, you look back and you think, well, that changed my life in a way. Many workplaces kind of retreated into the shells. But I'm guessing Sodexo, where they were on the front line in so many things, just had to step up. During that period. Yeah,
very much so. And it really brought out a lot of characters that you'll find on so many Sodexo sites now. The supervisors, the managers, even account directors joined in a very similar way, or were tasked in a very similar way, because we were on Sodexo Live at the time, to be part of this ever-changing response, ever-changing requirements.
So what was Sodexo Live? Sorry.
So Sodexo Live is our part of the business that runs all of our live events. So Sodexo Live, we've got St James's Park, we have Old Trafford Cricket Ground, Nottingham Forest, Fulham Pier, their new renovation. All of that live aspect of that, we operate that. So they, in terms of like staff management and the requirements of the day-to-day, you look at Royal Ascot, we have 15,000 staff required on the main weekend. yeah, it's a really interesting part of the business to,
No,
to
absolutely.
spend time on.
And a kind of business that's it's almost synonymous with precarious work in the past, I guess, that whole sector, that whole industry, with lowish pay and temporary work, etc. And that's a challenge for you to just bring that precariousness to a more permanent, more confident workforce.
Yeah, very much so. It's always going to be the nature of hospitality that there's no guaranteed hours for certain roles. When you look at football events, it depends how Newcastle are doing in the cup. Whether St James's has work that day. What I think what Sodexo Live do very well is they're honest about it. There's no 0-hour contract.
Yeah.
People are with us on a casual worker agreement. They understand that there may be lots of work, there may be not, but we support people's right to have another job,
Of course.
to have other opportunities, and to not be available at times. And it's a real two-way street, and that's what we do well with our casual workforce, is that we remind them of their right to it as well. It's not just a one-way street.
And I think there's a bit of a debate now going through the country on 0 hours contracts and the precarious nature of those particular contracts in certain circumstances. But the Charter's always taken the view on those that if by mutual consent people want a 0 hours contract, like it suits their lifestyle, then good on them, and let's use them that way.
It was interesting when the wording first came out as part of the manifesto. It was like, it's very well intended.
Yeah.
However, there are a lot of businesses that operate in this country where both the people and the business do well.
We just have to see what exploitative means.
Yes,
I think is the point, and we'll get there undoubtedly over the next 18 months or so, I'm sure.
Yeah.
So tell me, you're the program head of Starting Fresh. So what is Starting Fresh? Tell me the genesis of it. How did it come about?
So Starting Fresh was born almost 2 years ago as a concept by my wonderful colleague Evelina. She worked with the recruitment team and with our justice segment, and as we operate 6 prisons, and the entire workforce across the country is facing major skill shortages, and there is such an untapped resource of people in prison, or people that have left prison, or even in the community with a conviction. We're looking at about a fifth of the working population have a conviction greater than a driving conviction. And tapping into that resource has enabled us to really connect with some incredible people that in the past some people were just put to one side because they'd made a single mistake.
Sure.
That has come from being what Evelina's initial vision was, and she developed it into an entire program that works and has now got 3 main factors of what we do. So Starting Fresh covers us in terms of Sodexo as a prison operator. So we embed that Starting Fresh culture with the work schemes that our prison employment leads do within the prisons, working with the men and women that we have. We have Sodexo as a thought leader, so that comes into what I'm doing today, and working with other companies, as you said, like Mindy, like G4S, that typically are competitors, but in this space shouldn't be.
Yeah.
We're very large companies with a large footprint that can make a huge difference to such a large part of the population.
Sure.
So why would I compete with people on that? Guy Grant, who works for Amy, does a lot of work in prisons, again, would traditionally be a competitor.
Yeah.
But he's doing amazing work in the prisons, and I have no problem being public with that and saying, well, they work for another company, but they're doing a good job. And he's exactly the same, and he does the same with me. And that's the way that it should be. And the final part is Sodexo as an employer. So my day-to-day and the team that work with me, we go to the prisons, we engage, we provide an overview of what Sodexo is, as that's an important thing, but work with all the men and women we speak to about their employability.
Sure.
And then on their release, or as they're approaching release, once they're on the other side of the gate working with probation, we continue to work with them, find them roles with us, or when they come up and say, oh, well, there's this job here, would that be applicable? Again, as long as someone gets a job, I don't care where it is. If I've impacted that person, whether it's just the presentation when I'm in the prison, and I've spent my 10, 15, 20 minutes with them,
Sure.
and they take on anything that I've said to go and get work.
So does this program predominantly work with prisons where Sodexo are present as an employer already?
No, so that's how it initially started. We started in our prisons. It was
How many prisons do you manage, or
so
you've got work?
We've got 6 prisons that we operate completely.
Okay.
From there, we've got a few contracts with probation service as well, and we tap into that resource as well to work with people who are still being supported by the probation service. But we started at 6 with our prisons, and now we have just gone over 50 prisons across the country that actively engage with us.
Okay.
So whether that's us still going in and we'll go and do the events, or they're just comfortable with where they are with their employment and they're still on their journey to improve their employment opportunities for their men and women.
Sure.
But refer people into us, ask for us, and, well, what have you got on this release area?
Okay.
Because as with the service industry, there's parts of the country where we've got 1 or 2 sites.
Mm.
But as in Manchester, as I said, we've got thousands of jobs available,
Sure.
thousands of positions, which leads to dozens of jobs availability. Even
And are you involved in
alongside
Manchester prisons here, or?
So we've got Forest Bank.
Okay.
That is a Sodexo prison.
Right.
And then there's 2 of the other prisons. The only ones we don't work with are Category A prisons.
Okay.
And that's not on a judgment call. It's just not viable for employability. If you're in a Category A prison, you're not going to be looking for a job anytime soon.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that becomes pretty obvious, doesn't it? So that employability bit. So people come straight out of prison. The perception is you're not ready for work yet. There's a bit of conditioning that needs to be done beforehand. So how do you intervene in that space?
I think that's part. There are many challenges that we face in terms of people with convictions full stop. But with our prison leavers in particular, is that they're going to need, whether they've been in for a month or 20 years, there's always going to need be some sort of reconditioning and some support. And we work with other parties. We're not the expert.
Okay.
And that's been key to our development over the past 12 months, is we're good at what we're good at. I know how to get someone a house, but I don't have those contacts. Sure. I'm not the expert. That's not my job. And I don't mean that in a sense of, well, I shouldn't do that. What it means is that I should know who does.
Yeah.
And we work really closely with the experts in those fields to make sure that we're referring people through. We're showing them that we're supporting you in this. Let's get these people involved with you as well. But the employability factor, when they're inside, the work that the prison employment leads are doing with the men and women is really key. So they're making sure they're getting their qualifications whilst they're in prison. So they're coming out with their level 2 food hygiene, with their whammy tab cleaning, with their biohazard cleaning. I mean, those guys that get that, they're brilliant. They're so employable because they're willing to do the work. Statistically, people who are given an opportunity after prison stay with you for longer and work harder. And it's such an easy sell to those of us in the room.
Sure.
And that's what my job is to bring all those 3 focuses of starting fresh together. Tell
me a bit about the numbers. What have you got in service at the moment?
So in 2024, we hired 146 people with a conviction directly into Sodexo.
Okay.
We just under 40 of them were prison leavers that we directly dealt with.
Right.
Across our platform at the minute, we are working with around 300 to 400 people with convictions that are actively engaging week in, week out, that we're trying to find work for. And again, that is ideally with Sodexo, that'd be great.
But it may not be.
So in terms of the numbers there'll always be people that need support on any disadvantaged group. And that's important to consider as well. But for what I focus on, being able to wake up in the morning and go, right, who's next? That's always going to be a key part.
And I presume you're working with social services, with DWP and probation service.
Yeah, so there's so many complexities, as I'm sure you're aware of when people leave prison. If they come out on license, they're technically still serving their sentence. They can be recalled at any point. So we have to work very closely with probation, that we're not setting them up to fail. Exclusion zones are a very good example of that. Someone's committing an offence, they're not allowed in a certain area. Is the place I'm putting them,
of course,
causing them to commit a crime, essentially? And that has been the case, and we that has been a challenge of what we did. Is we very, very nearly caused someone to break their conditions because of how they would have needed to get to that site. But by working with probation, you can put exclusions into
real
that.
practical details.
Yeah,
that you
and
get into.
it's just about making sure that, look, like Sean is going to be working at this site here. He needs to travel that site. These are his shift times. Can he go through that exclusion zone at those times? And they'll come back and say, yeah, as long as he's on this bus, no problem. So it is key, and the relationships that we've built with the probation services have really helped with that.
So I'm fascinated that the leadership in Sodexo clearly very strong vision about this program to give it the license to empower you and colleagues to crack on with it. What do you have to do for the culture within the organisation? Colleagues who are working alongside, or managers that are, how do I accept and how do I work with this person?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. The support from even all the way at the top at a board level is fantastic.
Sure.
I've got a direct line to board members about this, but very much in my line management. My manager Rebecca is possibly the most supportive person I've ever met.
Fantastic.
In terms of freeing me up to shake the tree, because that's what this needs. Because one of the biggest challenges that any company in this space will face is their own culture. It's something that, we talk about James Timpson a lot, because we were all standing on the shoulders of giants with that. And even he had to hide it from the business to begin with. But because he did, we don't have to. So the biggest challenge you'll face are within. And a lot of it is understandable. There's always going to be some sort of, what about this? What about that? And there's very extreme examples, but I would never put someone with fraud offences into an account manager role. I wouldn't put someone with care offences for a hospital
Although
role.
the skills, for someone to commit fraud, probably good with numbers.
Oh, very much so. We talk about people that are inside for drug offences. Well, actually, with their management skills, you could say that their debt recovery skills could be improved. But in terms of their management skills, being able to operate a business, understanding overheads, and understanding risk, probably more than you and I have faced. And it's getting that across. It's all about conversation and challenging people and not afraid to be the bad guy as such. I'm quite happy to be the bad guy because where I stand is in a very good place.
But what I was trying to get at, it was, so I've got a team, and all of a sudden someone comes in and they've had a conviction, they've served time. How do you manage the team around that person to go, come on, give them a break?
Yeah, no, exactly. Them. The team on paper, and I'm well aware it isn't always the case, but on paper would never know. So we are a ban-the-box employer. So the role doesn't require a DBS. Even that, the only thing the hiring manager may ever know is that they're a starting fresh candidate. But that means that they may have got a caution when they were 16 for having a fight, all the way to just come outside for 20 years for murder. So it gives them no information whatsoever about the candidate. When it's a role that requires a DBS, part of our process is to ensure that the hiring manager understands what the risk is, and I work with them to create the risk assessment. And the only other person that should know is the HR business partner, and they complete that. They have the final say in terms of the risk assessment. But then again, from the board, I'm empowered to challenge back at that, and it's great. And we do work well together. It always has to be that conversational piece, because some sites are different. But in terms of the team, when it does come out, or when it could come out, everybody's story is their own. If they choose to tell the team, that's up to them. But if there's ever anything that the team needs, they can come back to us. We deal with these people every day. We have relationships we've built in. We've met these people when they were in prison. We've met them at the most vulnerable. And that's the reminder, and the constant thing of going through is that it's just someone who needs support. What someone's done before they walk through a door when I've met them is none of my concern. What happens next should be the same as any other employee that needs help.
Completely get it, and that's where we would be in the Good Employment Charter. It's just the reality of how people react, and how you manage that culture, I guess, is quite a challenge for some. It
always will be. It always will be. It's about challenging why the person there. I'm not very good with the answer no if it isn't followed with a why. And for me, that anybody who has that sort of prejudice that they're not willing to share, they're not willing to challenge themselves, well, I'll go and challenge it for you, not a problem, and I'll come and have that conversation with you. I'll sit you down with the person.
Fascinating.
Because that'll be there.
There's so many questions here. and I think we touched on this before we put the microphones on here. what are the limits that Sodexo set about types of offence that you would engage with?
Yeah, they understandably there's a lot of businesses that will draw a line of where it is because of the segments they work with. But because we have such a wide array of services, of contracts, of clients that we work with, every single person that comes through Starting Fresh is dealt with on a case-by-case basis. There isn't an offence that comes through that off the bat is a no.
Okay.
There are, of course, offences out there that will drastically limit what we can offer. There are thousands of people we've dealt with in Starting Fresh since its inception, and we've just had the second person that I've had to turn around and go, look, I'm not going to be able to offer you something. But that's based on their conditions.
Yeah, okay.
It's not based on the offence itself.
Right.
So they'll have conditions in place that they're not allowed to be out of place at a certain time or in certain places or have certain technologies, for example.
Okay.
With those all stacked up, I still do have a responsibility to the business. And if I can't find someone work, I'll be honest with them. It isn't the outcome that I want. And it is rarely, very rare, like I said, 2 to 3,000 in the outcome. But being honest with the people about it is key.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And the way in which you then move people through the organisation, okay, so we understand you get them into either Sodexo or elsewhere. What about the progression of people with convictions through the organisation? How does that manifest itself?
What's really good is in terms of the way our recruitment team now operates all of our vacancies, whether it's our frontline roles, like how I joined the company, or whether it's roles that attract up to 6-figure salaries. They all go through the same team, which means that my access to those jobs is exactly the same. So in terms of direct route into the business, it's there straight from the get-go. For the progression, that's our next key target, is to monitor how that's happening. We did have someone in one of the hospitals. He joined as kitchen porter. He'd done chef in the prison, but quite rightly, along with what the DWP about any job, better job career, he got his head down. What job have you got to me to begin with? Oh, we've got this. He then went on to be a chef in the hospital. He's now left Sodexo and is a chef in another business.
Fantastic.
He was with us 6-7 months, I think, in total, if that. For me, that's still a success. In the service industry, there's always going to be turnover of staff because there's always going to be different opportunities that suit. Again, it's one of those things. Business-wise, would we like to keep everyone? Yes, absolutely. But for me, he's come in as a kitchen porter. He's then moved into a position of chef and has now gone on to be a chef in a different company. That is a key sort of frontline progression process.
That's a big tick for you, absolutely.
But the whole ethos of Sodexo, and I've shown it in terms of my progression, everybody has that opportunity to progress. And once you're in the business, which is obviously the key part of what I do for our beneficiaries, every opportunity is afforded to you if you want it. If you don't have those skills yet, you can do it. We work very closely, and fingers crossed we're going to be able to offer it in the prison soon. As you can imagine, there's some red tape involved. But our apprenticeship team are very, very hot at offering apprenticeships. So Emily, who works with me, she's just about to finish off a HR apprenticeship so that she can further herself in the company. I started that one, but I'm moving on to a social value apprenticeship.
Okay.
Because it's such an impactful part of what we do, and it's all about that progression.
It's pretty clear social value is going to be so important moving forward, particularly for the kind of public contracting world. Absolutely, with the new Procurement Act coming in. Now, look, that all sounds brilliant, but you must have had problems. It's not all gone swimmingly, and that's where the lessons are learned, isn't it? So
very much so, and this has been key. So like I mentioned before about very, very nearly causing someone to breach his conditions. That was thankfully learning ahead of the time. It's about finding that support. The not being the expert in everything is key to being able to make sure we're doing it. There's people that have fallen through the cracks that we could have employed with us that have gone on to potential competitors, but have gone on to other work, or have disengaged, or people that end up back in prison. If you don't find employment and you're homeless, you're going back to prison.
Sure.
It's basically impossible to not end up back in prison.
It's the fundamentals to have a life. But, through the risk processes that you'll do, the risk management processes, undoubtedly, that are in place, have you had cases where that's gone wrong? What lessons have you learned from that?
No, I think we've been not risk averse as such. I think there's always going to be that sort of backward step first for things. There's been a couple of people where we've put them into roles that maybe we didn't explain them fully, where they've been away. It's ones where they've been working away, and for someone leaving prison, that sounds really good, but actually it's very, very labour intensive. You do get 3 weeks off following it, but you have to work for those 3, and it's that sort of thing. But what we've done from that now and working with that segment, they've created a trial. So people have got a full week paid trial doing the work. So instead of it being straight in at the deep end with 3 weeks, you go away for a week first. Then you come back, and we've tapped into other resources and support partners to help fund with the travel, because it's a different setup than what it would be. It's all the little learnings. Things will go wrong. You'll get there and it won't work out. Sure. But it won't be any more than your standard organic candidates.
Okay.
There's everybody who will listen to this will have employed someone or will have worked with someone who they've walked in the door and they've gone, who on earth is this? How has this person got past the interview? And there is no bearing on them having a conviction or not. Okay. Because in the vast majority of employment places, you won't know if they've got one. Sure. There's no DBS needed. And even if it did come back as positive, someone's done a risk assessment and said yes. Yeah. Okay. And I think that's the thing. There will always be learning, but no more. As long as you're reaching out to the right people, no more than there would be with any other candidate. And that's been the key thing that I get across to the business, and that is continuous learning to the business. That your mistakes will happen, but it's not because they have a conviction. Sure. Your mistake will be believing it's because of the conviction. Okay. But it's somewhere in the management of that particular individual or the system or the... Very much so. There's never been someone with a theft conviction gone into somewhere that we've dismissed for theft. Fine. I think is the black and white. And that's what's in the back of the mind of the listener here. Understandably so. Absolutely understandably so. Absolutely. Now you're a kind of multifaceted business, Sodexo. You're doing all sorts of stuff. What sectors of work are the key candidates for people with convictions? Yeah, so there's the vast majority do go into frontline roles, but that does include. What does that mean? Is that security? Security is a little different because of the SIA licensing. You need to have been free of a conviction for X amount of time, unless you appeal to the SIA. And without going into all of that essentially, if someone has an SIA license, that does the arguing for me. Yeah. As well, the government's already said yes. Yeah. But our frontline roles can be our core staff, the people that make the business run. So our cleaners, our porters, our chefs, our food service assistants. But the wide range of what they do is by far and above the main focus of what we want to get from Starting Fresh. We're put with the chefs that come in. The one we've just put in to one of our main hospitals in Yorkshire, he's come in and he's already up for Star of the Month because he's come in, he's done this and done that. And actually, when the majority of us think of what a chef is, yes, it's classed as a frontline role in our industry, but I mean, I'm all right in the kitchen. But I'll tell you right now, nobody in my house would say I'm a chef. And it's that sort of thing. A lot of that is there, and we try and focus the roles that we look for people on what they want to do. We'll always listen of what they want to do. We want to get them any job, get some clean money coming in, and it's a big thing for people coming out of prison. But we don't stop working with them then. If they want to continue working with us, what's next? They're still a Starting Fresh candidate. They're still someone that we've engaged with, and someone we know and what their capabilities are. So you do progress them through. Yeah. Certainly, we've seen, and one of our founder members, Back on Track, takes ex-offenders and moves them through, particularly around catering. Yes. And I think the catering hospitality world, for those of in the sector that are listening to this, have a think, because recruitment and retention, big issues right now across. So we'll come on to business benefits maybe later, but
a lot of our members are small businesses. They're not anything like the scale of Sodexo, or can throw the resources of the team that you have to look at this particular area and facilitate it. So what's your advice to a small business that are thinking about, well, maybe I should be more open-minded, engaging with people with convictions? How would they go about that, Sean?
For me, it's just looking beyond the obvious. You know, it's very easy to look at someone. One of the examples I use in sort of the HR spaces when I'm talking to our HR managers is asking them what burglary means to them. Would they hire someone who's been convicted of burglary? Well, you know, they've stolen something. Well, not necessarily. Burglary isn't always theft. So to have been convicted of burglary, it's to go somewhere as a trespasser and commit or intend to commit assault, theft, or cause criminal damage. So they may never have stolen anything, but they'd have a burglary conviction. And that kind of opens people's eyes. So it's just to be aware that what you think is right isn't necessarily right. But to look at the data and look at what I've mentioned before, in that people with convictions, by and large, in the late 90%, stay in jobs longer, are more loyal to the jobs, and that's what small businesses need. Big businesses, they're always going to have the turnover. But if you can get someone who works for you for 10 years as a small business, that's the foundation of what you do. That's someone that your customers recognise and brings that baseline.
Where could a small business go for advice around this?
Anybody that listens to this, anybody that wants to get involved with starting fresh and even just that thought side of it, they can get in touch with me. And if I don't know the answer, I'll tell them someone that does.
Okay. Well, that's a great offer.
And it's key to that. It may be a one email exchange. It may be 10. You may end up coming to prisons with me. It's something that we need to do, and my colleagues across the social impact space will do exactly the same, because it's all well and good us doing it, but small businesses run the country.
Sure. Yeah, 85% of them in Greater Manchester.
Exactly. And without there, and so in terms of support of getting someone in, reach out, ask the questions, find people who do, because there are now more of us that do know the answer or are willing to give an answer and be the one that's wrong.
You know, SMEs will do this passively rather than you're doing it actively, going to prisons, finding candidates, etc., supporting them. The vast majority of employers will come across without maybe the DBS check box ticked, but through interview find out that this person's got a conviction. So, you know, how does that work? Do you do passive recruitment in that way as well, obviously?
Yeah, so one of the key things we've done in the past few months is now we're a ban-the-box employer. So if our roles don't require a DBS, we don't ask. What we have now introduced along through some very careful wording to retain being ban-the-box and where that information goes is that my team and solely my team now get the information that about someone that wants to self-identify as a starting fresh candidate, and we'll work with them and let them know, because some people don't know whether they have a conviction or a caution, and I think that says a lot about the justice system, but that's, I'm sure that's a conversation for another time. And it is all about conversation. So even on our passive approach to people applying to us with convictions and cautions and all sorts of things from back in the day, it's just about the conversation. How does that actually impact your business? There's a very extreme example I use in terms of people who faced abuse and have committed a crime because of that. Well, if anybody ever said that, you'd kind of sit there and go, all right, okay. You've just got to challenge yourself, and if you have a line, then you have a line.
So this is fascinating, though, thinking about how you advertise roles in that passive way, so that someone's sitting there with a conviction thinking, oh, I'm not going to bother because I'll never get past the first stage. How do you open the doors in that way?
So we've got it on there. There's always the explanations in terms of little boxes and that sort of thing that are on the applications. Our application process is designed to be as slimline as possible, especially once you've registered, you've got your CV and everything on there. But what we do is we explain what Starting Fresh does, and that what we do have is a guaranteed interview scheme now for people with convictions, and again, the backing for that from the board has been fantastic. But if you have a conviction and you apply for Sodexo, if you match the criteria for that job, and very occasionally there'll be sort of very specific things that certain sites are looking for, that as much as on paper you think you do, you don't, I'll explain that and I will go through that on an individual basis with people. But you're guaranteed interview if you match that job. So being open, we're really encouraging people to be open about their convictions, because for a lot of things you shouldn't be ashamed.
So it's almost like a protected characteristic, is it?
I would love for that to be the case. The issues that people face when leaving prison, the vast majority of us could never imagine. They're in prison for a reason. They're definitely in prison for a reason, but they have done their time. Society has decided that is what they needed. They come out,
and they've got complex needs around them.
If they didn't when they went in, there's many a study now that they develop them. They're told when to wake up, they're told when to eat, and all of a sudden, see you later, have I got a house? No. All right then. What are we doing to support these people? And so that's why we encourage them to be open with us, to see what support we have, because I work with a wonderful organisation called Only a Pavement Away, who work with a lot of different people, but they work primarily with people with convictions and veterans. And the work they do is utterly fantastic.
They work very closely with the Mayor's homeless charity.
Yes. Yeah. Actually. And even just getting people in touch with those guys, getting like, look, do you know about this? Do you know about that? Oh, well, they mentioned it. Right, well, let's mention. Take some responsibility. This is what's going to help you get there. And I think that links back to what can smaller employers and individual employers do, is just be aware that because someone's got a conviction doesn't mean that they'll do something wrong. They might just need a little bit of help. But basing that on protected characteristics, would you turn someone down if they had a disability? I would very much like to think not.
So in terms of, the Employment Rights Bill going through the Parliament now, is there something in there that you would want to lobby for change on around this?
Ban the box is wonderful. It's a great, to coin it as a dirty sort of phrase, it's a great advertising tool for a business. But surely that should just be the case. It'd be a stretch to say as a protected characteristic, ideal world, blue sky thinking, yes. But for me, ban the box should be mandatory. If the role doesn't require it, then why can you ask someone?
Yeah. And that was one of the reasons we put it into the Good Employment Charter. The Good Employment Charter isn't well, it's a stretch for some, but it's the building blocks of good employment. We believe, and certainly, as we're watching the Employment Rights Bill come through, we're thinking, well, actually, that's what we've been doing for 5 years. It's where do we take it now? So where would we take this now? Where would we take this agenda now?
It needs to be... There's far too many divisive directions for a lot of bills that come through generally, and that's politics for you. But even in terms of employment direction, well, we need to do this, we need to do that. For me, everything being fluid would be the ideal. People aren't required to let people know what they need support with, what they've done, what they haven't done. If people match the job, they match the job. We should be looking at people, we should be looking at skills, and we should be looking at transferable skills. What support people need should be a tertiary thing. I'm in employment, I've got my full-time contract, I'm past my 2 years. So if I had anything wrong with me, anything that I needed support with, the company's obliged to do it. What difference does that make now? If I got a conviction now, I very much doubt Sodexo are going to fire me. Depending on what it is. If it was company-based, I would hope they did.
I think they probably
But do you know what I mean? In terms of the support that was there, I know what support's there. So why does it take that time? There's lots of things I'd love to do.
No, that's great, Sean. And I want to get back to the leadership culture piece as well. Really kind of just to sum up, if small businesses are listening to this and they are going, well, that's my heart says yes, but really, have I got the time, the resources, the energy to engage in this agenda? What's your message to them? How do you flip that?
I think people because of a lack of information, a lack of support along the years, it's still a developing area.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the biggest companies of the world are still not there yet. We're not there yet.
Mm-hmm.
We're doing very well, but we're nowhere near where I want us to be. It's not as difficult as people think it is.
Okay.
And that applies to my own internal arguments and struggles and discussions within our own business. And any business that says they don't have a problem with arguing with people or people's opinions, they're not telling the truth. They're really not. But as a smaller business, you're the person that makes that decision.
Mm-hmm.
You're the person that decides to give someone a chance. And a real push that I've been doing is getting away from using second chance, because of so many people that I speak to, the men and women I speak to in prison, have never had a first chance.
Mm-hmm.
I was very fortunate as a child that my parents were together, but we were a very low income family. I know that my dad stole from the shop to feed us.
Mm-hmm.
And now I'm doing very well because someone along the line gave my dad a chance to work. Sure. And two people, he worked 2 jobs. Mm-hmm. And they gave him a chance. He never got caught, he did well. But some people do, and that's why some people got caught. And it goes back to this: would you steal to feed your family if you had nothing? Mm. Of course you would. Again, someone says they wouldn't, then rubbish.
Okay. But
that's what it boils down to. Why? Have a think of why would someone do this? There are many reasons that people are convicted and why they have convictions. Mm. But there's only one reason to say no, and that's just you're not accepting of their reasons.
Yeah. Okay. I get that. It's transferring all of that kind of doing the right thing into business benefits as well. And I know Sodexo are seeing those, but it's how we scale those down into the smaller organisations as well.
Yeah. Anybody that does this, they will see benefits. There will be mistakes. You'll make a mistake with anything. You make a mistake with your purchasing.
Of course.
And plenty of businesses have ordered too many, not enough. Oh, we could have sold more. That's a mistake. Every business has made mistakes. Don't be afraid of them. Don't be afraid of them with people.
That's really good advice. Sean, thank you very much for your time and your offer as well. We will make sure that people do have your contact details who are listening to this and want to follow up.
Very much so.
Sean, it's been great to meet you.
Thank you very much for having me. Thank you.